Humanity is a contradiction. We are brilliant yet brutal, compassionate yet cruel, capable of breathtaking wonders yet responsible for unthinkable horrors. We have conquered disease, walked on the moon, and unlocked the secrets of the universe. Yeah, we've also waged endless wars, enslaved our own kind, and invented ways to inflict suffering that's truly beyond imagination. But it's not just our darkness that makes us fascinating, it is our strangeness. We are bizarre, unpredictable, and often downright absurd, from ancient civilizations that thrived on human sacrifice to modern science proving that parts of your brain are as old as you are. The story of humanity is one of mystery, madness, and mind-blowing discoveries. Are we monsters? Miracles? Maybe something in between. This is the truth about who we really are, our brilliance, our depravity, and the unbelievable reality of what it means to be human. In 1984, a 22-year-old college student named Jennifer Thompson was attacked in her apartment in Burlington, North Carolina. Determined to remember her assailant's face, she studied his features as he assaulted her, committing every detail to memory. Later, when police showed her a lineup, she confidently pointed to Ronald Cotton. She testified against him in court with absolute certainty, saying she would never forget the face of the man who ruined her life. Cotton was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But the thing was, he was completely innocent. After 11 years behind bars, DNA testing proved that another man, Bobby Poole, was the actual rapist. Thompson had unknowingly formed a false memory, one so powerful that it destroyed a man's life. And her case is not unique. Studies show that eyewitness testimonies, once considered the gold standard in criminal cases, are one of the most unreliable forms of evidence. The Innocence Project found that over 70% of wrongful convictions, later overturned by DNA evidence, were based on eyewitness misidentifications. Your mind is not a perfect recording device. It doesn't store memories like a camera, faithfully capturing every detail. Instead, it reconstructs events each time you recall them, filling in gaps, altering facts, and sometimes outright inventing things. Researchers like Elizabeth Loftus have demonstrated how shockingly easy it is to implant false memories. In one study, she convinced participants they had been lost in a shopping mall as children, a completely fabricated event, yet many insisted they vividly remembered it happening. They described details like the store layout, their panic, and even the relief of being found. Their brains had built a memory from nothing. False memories aren't just a problem in courtrooms. Think about the Mandela effect. Millions of people swear they remember things that never happened, like the Monopoly man having a monocle. It doesn't. Or the Berenstain Bears being spelt with an E, Berenstein, instead of an A, Berenstain. If entire groups can misremember pop culture, what else might your brain be getting wrong? For me, it was the loop in Ford. You know the Ford logo? It's got a weird little loop in there. It does. I don't know why that's so crazy, but it blew my... Like the Nelson Mandela one. No, I know when Nelson Mandela died. The Ford one? Look, the truth is bizarre. Every time you recall a moment from your past, you're reshaping it. Memories fade, details blur, and with the right suggestion, even the most unshakable conviction can be completely false. The question isn't just whether you've misremembered something, but how much of your past is simply a lie. In 2013, a study by the United Nations revealed a shocking truth. More people in the world have access to a mobile phone than a sanitary toilet. At the time, around 6 billion people owned a mobile device, while only about 4.5 billion had access to a toilet or proper sanitation. A decade later, the gap remains staggering. Today, virtually everybody has access to a phone. In fact, in 2022, there were more than 8.58 billion mobile subscriptions in use compared to a global population of 7.95 billion. The contrast is even more than just an unusual statistic. It's a disturbing insight into global priorities. Technology has reached the world's most remote corners, yet basic sanitation remains a privilege rather than a human right. In India alone, over 500 million people still practice open defecation, while the country simultaneously boasts over 1.2 billion mobile phone users. In places like sub-Saharan Africa, you'll find villages with smartphones but no access to clean water. Children in slums play mobile games while their families struggle with deadly waterborne diseases caused by poor sanitation. The consequences are horrifying. Lack of access to toilets leads to the contamination of drinking water, spreading diseases like cholera, dysentery, and typhoid. Every year, over 800,000 children under 5 die from diarrheal diseases, most of which could be prevented with access to proper toilets and clean water. In contrast, mobile phones are becoming cheaper, more accessible, and more desirable than ever. Governments and corporations invest in telecommunications infrastructure, but millions are still left without a way to safely dispose of human waste. Even in wealthier nations, this issue persists. In the United States, nearly 550,000 people experience homelessness on any given night, many of whom have smartphones, but no guaranteed access to a bathroom. Cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles have been criticized for their growing crisis of human waste in the streets as public restroom facilities fail to meet demand. Meanwhile, in Silicon Valley, tech billionaires are developing foldable phones, AI assistants, and 6G networks, while thousands of their own citizens live without access to the most basic human necessities. And how did we get here? Well, the answer is really quite simple. It's profit, isn't it? Smartphones are a multi-billion-dollar industry, while sanitation is a public health concern that governments often ignore. Corporations can make fortunes selling the latest iPhone, but there's no big business in providing toilets for the poor. And so, we live in a world where people are more likely to scroll through social media than have a safe place to take a shit. Sorry, it doesn't say that. A safe place to relieve themselves, a world where convenience is prioritized over survival. It's not an appropriate place for a joke, I apologize. Imagine looking at a painting and seeing shades, hues, and depths of color that no one else can comprehend. A blue sky isn't just blue, it's a swirling spectrum of sapphire, indigo, cerulean, and electric teal. Grass isn't just green, it's a living tapestry of emerald, jade, and unseen variations that would be impossible for most of us to describe. But this is the reality for Concetta Antizzo, an Australian artist with a rare and almost superhuman ability to see colors that ordinary humans just can't imagine. Antizzo is a tetrachromat, meaning she has 4 types of color receptors in her eyes instead of the usual 3. You see, most humans rely on 3 cones, red, green, and blue. These interpret the world around them. However, tetrachromats have a 4th cone, allowing them to distinguish up to 100 million shades of color compared to the mere 1 million seen by the average person. In simple terms, the world she sees is like a hypersaturated dreamscape where every shadow, reflection, and surface bursts with variations that are invisible to nearly everyone else. This phenomenon is a genetic mutation that scientists only recently confirmed. Research suggests that 12% of women and 8% of men may have the genetic potential for tetrachromacy, but very few actually develop the ability. That's because it requires a unique combination of genetics and brain development, meaning that even if a person is born with the extra cone, their brain might never learn to process the additional colors. Concetta Antizzo, however, is one of the rare few whose brain fully embraces her supervision. And this raises a question for the rest of us. What else are we missing? If there are colors in the world that we simply lack the biological tools to see, what other aspects of reality could be hidden from us? Could our understanding of the universe be limited by how our senses have evolved? Some scientists speculate that other undiscovered tetrachromats might be walking among us, perceiving a world that we can never truly understand. Concetta Antizzo has described her gift as both a blessing and a curse. The richness of her vision is overwhelming, her world an endless explosion of color and light. But for the rest of us, it's a reminder that our perception of reality is not reality itself, it's just what our brains allow us to see. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's chillingly true. The US government deliberately poisoned alcohol supplies knowing full well that people would drink it. And this wasn't an accident or a case of bootleggers cutting corners. This was a calculated decision, one that led to the horrific deaths of thousands of people. The story begins with Prohibition, which lasted between 1920 and 1933, when the US government attempted to ban alcohol consumption nationwide. Predictably, Americans ignored the law and bootleggers ensured a steady supply of liquor flowed through underground bars and speakeasies. To combat this, the federal government took drastic action. They ordered industrial alcohol suppliers to add lethal chemicals to their products, knowing that desperate drinkers would still consume it. And the logic was as brutal as it was flawed. If illegal alcohol became deadly, people would stop drinking it. But that's not what happened. Instead, people kept drinking it, and they died in droves. By 1926, more than 1,000 people had died in New York City alone. Thousands more suffered permanent blindness, paralysis, organ failure, or excruciating deaths. Even as the death toll climbed, the government refused to stop. By the end of Prohibition, an estimated 10,000 people had died from deliberately poisoned alcohol. The government had essentially declared chemical warfare on its own citizens. One of the most common toxic additives was methanol, also known as wood alcohol. Unlike regular ethanol, methanol attacks the nervous system, leading to blindness and agonizing death. Others included kerosene, chloroform, and even formaldehyde, substances you'd expect to find in an autopsy lab, not in a cocktail. When doctors and public officials begged the government to stop, they were ignored. Treasury officials dismissed the victims as criminals who deserved their fate for breaking the law. Even when families wept over the bodies of loved ones who had unknowingly consumed poisoned liquor, officials continued the program. Prohibition eventually ended in 1933, but the poisonings left a stain on history, one the government rarely acknowledges. It remains one of the most shocking acts of state-sponsored mass poisoning in history, an era when the US government played executioner, punishing those who dared defy its moral crusade. It's one of the most chilling ideas imaginable, the thought that your mind could remain aware even after your body is gone. Evidence suggests that a severed human head may retain consciousness for several seconds after decapitation. Does the person realize what has happened in those final, horrifying moments? Do they feel pain? Do they try to scream? Well, the most infamous case comes from Dr. Gabriel Buriot, a French doctor who witnessed the execution of Henri Languille by guillotine in 1905. Buriot claimed that immediately after the blade fell, Languille's severed head opened its eyes and stared at him. When the doctor called out the condemned man's name, the eyes focused on him with unmistakable recognition, as if aware. For 30 full seconds, the eyelids blinked and the pupils contracted, and finally the light faded. This wasn't an isolated incident. Similar reports exist from the French Revolution, when the guillotine was at its bloodiest. Executioners and spectators claimed to see decapitated heads changing facial expressions, eyes darting around, lips moving as if trying to speak. One particularly disturbing account describes a prisoner's severed head blushing in rage after being slapped by the executioner, as if it could feel the insult. But is there scientific truth to these accounts, or is it just a morbid myth? Modern research suggests that while full consciousness likely fades within seconds, the brain does not shut down instantly. Instead, it enters a rapid shutdown process, much like when a person suffers a fatal injury but remains briefly aware before death fully takes hold. Studies on rats have shown that after decapitation, brain activity persists for up to 30 seconds, with spikes resembling heightened awareness. If the same holds true for humans, the implications are pretty scary. Imagine realizing you've been decapitated, feeling the weightlessness, hearing the world around you, seeing the blood spray as your own head lands in a basket. Your mind desperately grasps for control, but your body, your voice, your breath is already lost forever. Think about looking at your spouse, your child, your best friends, and feeling with absolute certainty that they are not who they claim to be. Their face is the same, their voice is identical, they know everything they should, but deep in your gut, you just know. This person is an imposter, they're a perfect copy. Something is off, but no one believes you. This is the terrifying reality of Capgras delusion, one of the strangest and most disturbing psychological disorders ever recorded. Named after the French psychiatrist Joseph Capgras, who first documented the phenomenon in 1923, this condition causes people to believe that someone close to them, usually a spouse, a parent, or sibling, has been replaced by a perfect double. Sometimes it extends beyond people to pets, homes, or even their own reflections. All of it can feel like an eerie fake. One of the most famous cases was a woman who believed her husband had been swapped with an identical-looking stranger. She insisted that while he looked and sounded exactly the same, something fundamental was missing. His essence was gone. No amount of reasoning could convince her otherwise. Another case involved a man who believed his own mother was an imposter and went so far as to attack her, demanding she reveal where she had taken the real one. In some instances, patients believe multiple imposters exist, claiming that their loved ones are being swapped in and out by an unknown force. Neurologists believe this bizarre disorder stems from damage to the brain's facial recognition pathways, particularly in the right temporal lobe and limbic system, which control emotions and familiarity. Essentially, the person can still recognize a familiar face, but no longer feels the emotional connection that they once had. Unable to process this discrepancy, the brain takes a drastic step. It invents a reason. That reason? Well, the person must have been replaced. Some researchers have even linked Capgras to sleep deprivation, schizophrenia, and Alzheimer's disease, suggesting that under extreme mental stress, even a healthy brain might start to perceive familiar faces as strangers. It makes you wonder, could this condition exist on a spectrum? I mean, have you ever looked at someone you know and thought just for a fleeting second that they seem different today? They don't quite seem themselves. For most, just a passing feeling. But for those suffering from Capgras delusion, it's an inescapable nightmare, one where the people they love become eerie, inhuman intruders. Deep in the Indian state of Kerala, hidden among lush green fields and narrow village roads, lies Kadini, a tiny, unassuming town with a secret that defies science. In this village of just 2,000 families, over 400 pairs of twins have been born, an astronomical number compared to the global average. Here, twins walk the streets in every direction, filling classrooms, working in shops, and even confusing their own teachers and neighbors. Parents struggle to tell them apart. Entire families have generations of twins. It's a mystery that has baffled scientists for decades. The phenomenon is so bizarre that Kadini has 6 times the global average of twin births, and no one knows why. There's no obvious genetic trait among the locals to explain it, no unusual fertility treatments, no significant dietary differences. Yet even women who leave the village and marry outsiders have reported giving birth to twins at staggering rates. It's as if the town itself is responsible. One of the leading theories is something in the water, but testing has revealed nothing conclusive. Another hypothesis suggests that an undiscovered genetic mutation spreads through the population and is passed down through generations. Some locals believe in more mystical explanations, whispering that Kadini is blessed or cursed by some unknown force, one that binds its people to this extraordinary fate. Kadini isn't the only place with this mystery. A similar twin boom exists in Igbo-Ora in Nigeria, where twin births are also inexplicably high. Scientists studying Igbo-Ora have suggested that certain diets rich in yams and cassava might trigger hyperovulation, increasing the chances of multiple births. Could a similar effect be at play in Kerala? Some experts think so, but no solid evidence has been found. Despite the mystery, the twins of Kadini have embraced their uniqueness. A local group called the Twins and Kins Association was formed to support and study the phenomenon. Meanwhile, researchers continue their investigations, hoping to uncover what makes this small Indian town a biological anomaly. But until then, the enigma remains. Imagine a newborn baby, its soft skull wrapped tightly in cloth or bound with wooden boards, forced into an unnatural shape before it's even developed. Over time, the gentle pressure molds the skull, elongating it, flattening it, or creating bizarre cone-like structures. Now, for most of us, that sounds something like it's from a horror movie, yet cultures across the world have practiced cranial deformation for at least 9 millennia. From the Maya civilization in Central America to the Huns of Central Asia, from African tribes to aristocrats in France, the deliberate reshaping of human skulls was seen as a mark of beauty, power, or divine favor. One of the oldest cases comes from Neolithic sites in Iraq, where skulls were found that were purposefully elongated, suggesting that even in prehistoric times, humans were modifying their bodies to fit social ideals. In ancient Peru, the Paracas culture took skull binding to the extreme, creating elongated, almost alien-like craniums. Some of these skulls were so distorted that conspiracy theorists have claimed that they were proof of extraterrestrial life. The reality is no less strange. These people believed a long skull symbolized higher status, intelligence, or a closer connection to the gods. The Huns, the brutal horsemen who terrorized Europe, also practiced skull binding. Historical accounts suggest that warriors with elongated skulls were seen as more fearsome and powerful, an intimidating sight meant to strike terror into enemies. Among the Mangbetu people of Central Africa, a high, oval-shaped skull was a sign of nobility and sophistication. The practice was passed down for centuries, and even into the 20th century, some elders still carried the distinctive look. In France, during the 17th and 18th centuries, the aristocracy practiced a subtle version of this, binding infant skulls into a high, flat, and more refined shape. Though the practice wasn't as extreme, it was part of a long-standing belief that skull shape could reflect status and beauty. Modern science has confirmed that cranial modification does not affect intelligence, yet for thousands of years, people believed otherwise. Today, some isolated groups still carry on the tradition, mainly in Vanuatu, Polynesia, and parts of the Congo, but it's largely faded into history. Now, this sounds absurd at first. A bite from a lion, a venomous snake, or even a rabid dog seems like a much bigger threat than a bite from another human. But if you ever find yourself in a violent encounter, the last thing you want is to get bitten, because a human bite can be far more dangerous than most people realize. You see, our mouths are absolutely teeming with bacteria, hundreds of species of them, some of which are harmless, but many of which can cause devastating infections. In fact, a human bite can transfer more bacteria than a dog bite and is capable of leading to severe infections, sepsis, and even amputations. One of the most notorious bacteria found in humans' mouths is Eikenella corrodens, which can literally eat through flesh if left untreated. If a human bite punctures the skin and bacteria enter the bloodstream, the infection can spread rapidly, sometimes requiring aggressive medical intervention. And our bites can actually transmit diseases you'd think would be constrained to the bedroom. While not exactly easy, a person could, in theory, transmit a variety of normally sexually transmitted diseases via bite, including HIV, hepatitis B and C, herpes simplex virus, and syphilis, as well as other non-sexually transmitted nasties such as tuberculosis and tetanus. History is filled with gruesome cases that prove just how dangerous a human bite can be. One infamous case involved a British rugby player who lost part of his finger after being bitten during a game. Despite immediate medical attention, the wound became severely infected and doctors were forced to amputate to prevent the infection from spreading. Another example comes from a bar fight in New York where a man suffered a deep bite wound to his hand. Within days, his entire arm had swelled, turned black, and had to be amputated to save his life. Bite wounds are so hazardous that medical professionals classify them as high-risk injuries requiring immediate treatment with antibiotics. They are especially dangerous when they occur on the hands, as the tendons and joints provide an easy pathway for bacteria to spread deep into the body. Left untreated, a simple bite can lead to necrotizing fasciitis, flesh-eating disease, gangrene, or deadly bloodstream infections. Humans have been known to bite not just in fits of rage, but in acts of desperation, self-defense, and even during historical executions. The next time you think about a violent altercation, remember this: a punch might leave a bruise, but a bite on the hand could mean you need help opening cans for the rest of your life. For most of human history, we believe that Homo sapiens, modern humans, were the sole survivors, the last of our kind, the only intelligent species to walk the earth. But science has revealed something far stranger. We were never alone. Not only did our ancestors share the planet with other human species, but they interbred with them. And if you are of non-African descent, up to 4% of your DNA comes from Neanderthals. The Neanderthals were not the dim-witted cavemen pop culture once imagined. They were skilled hunters, complex thinkers, and survivors of Europe and Asia's harsh Ice Age landscapes. For nearly 400,000 years, they thrived in brutal conditions, creating tools, mastering fire, and even burying their dead. But around 40,000 years ago, something changed. They vanished. And yet, they never truly disappeared because part of them lives on inside us. The discovery of Neanderthal DNA in modern humans shocked scientists. The evidence was buried in our genetic code, not in fossils. Through ancient encounters, some violent, some intimate, our ancestors and Neanderthals mixed, leaving behind genetic fingerprints that still shape us today. This ancient inheritance could influence your hair, your immune system, even how you respond to pain. Some genetic traits, passed down from Neanderthals, have helped humans survive in colder climates, while others have left us vulnerable to certain diseases. But the Neanderthals weren't our only long-lost relatives. There was another group, even more mysterious, the Denisovans. While Neanderthal DNA is in most people outside of Africa, traces of Denisovan DNA are found in modern populations of Tibet, Papua New Guinea, and Australia. One of the Denisovans' most striking genetic gifts allows Tibetans to survive at extreme altitudes, breathing easily in oxygen-thin mountain air where others would struggle. The more we study ancient DNA, the more it becomes clear we were not a single species in isolation. We were a tangled web of interbreeding, survival, and extinction. The last Neanderthals may have disappeared long ago, but their legacy is written into our very being. When you look in the mirror, you might just be seeing the echoes of a species that vanished, but never truly left. Your stomach is a biological furnace, a churning, acidic pit designed to break down everything from a juicy steak to a handful of nuts. But here's something that will make you rethink the power of your own body. Your stomach acid is so strong that it can dissolve a razor blade. That's not just a wild claim, Scientists have tested this. In a study published in Gastrointestinal Endoscopy, researchers placed small razor blades in gastric acid, specifically the hydrochloric acid found in the human stomach. The result? Within 24 hours, the metal had corroded significantly, with some of it breaking down entirely. The acid in your gut has a pH of around 1 to 2, stronger than the acid in most car batteries, and powerful enough to dissolve bones over time. So, if your stomach can break down metal, what happens when people swallow objects that are not food? Well, believe it or not, people ingest sharp objects more often than you'd think. Prisoners and psychiatric patients sometimes swallow nails, paper clips, and even razor blades, often without suffering significant internal damage. In some cases, doctors have removed objects like coins, batteries, and even knives from the stomachs of patients who, against all logic, survived. While sharp objects can still tear through the digestive tract before they dissolve, the sheer power of stomach acid is sometimes enough to eat away at them first. Yet, despite its strength, your stomach doesn't digest itself thanks to a protective mucus lining that shields it from its own acidic onslaught. But in cases of severe ulcers, where this barrier breaks down, the acid can start eating away at your stomach wall, causing excruciating pain and even leading to perforation. It's a humbling thought. Inside you, right now, is an acid capable of dissolving metal, bone, and flesh. Your digestive system is a brutal, relentless machine, breaking down whatever it's given. So next time you eat, remember, you're not just chewing your food, you're dropping it into a biochemical furnace that could, given enough time, reduce steel to nothing. A shark slicing through the water, its fin cutting the surface, its jaws opening wide. That is an image that terrifies. Shark attacks have inspired some of the most chilling stories and films of all time, making the ocean seem like a predator's hunting ground. But here's a fact that will make your interpretation of what's actually dangerous change. You're more likely to die taking a selfie than from a shark attack. In 2018, researchers found that between 2011 and 2017, at least 259 people died worldwide while attempting to take selfies. In that same period, shark attacks claimed only about 50 lives. The numbers continue to grow, with reports confirming that selfie-related deaths have increased every year as smartphones become more advanced and people take bigger risks for that perfect shot. In 2024, selfie deaths were at least 480, and the causes? Well, falls from cliffs, drowning, electrocution, even being hit by trains. In India, a group of young men posed near a moving train thinking they could snap a dramatic last-second shot, but they miscalculated the speed and were killed instantly. The problem became so severe in Russia that the government issued official guidelines for safe selfies, warning against posing with weapons, standing on rooftops, or taking photos on train tracks. One woman accidentally shot herself in the head while trying to take a selfie with a loaded gun. Tourists in particular seemed drawn to deadly photo opportunities. In 2018, a couple fell to their deaths from Taft Point in Yosemite National Park while trying to capture the breathtaking scenery. In 2021, 3 people drowned after slipping into a waterfall in India while taking a group selfie. Some even ignore wild animal dangers. A man in China was mauled to death after climbing into a zoo enclosure to snap a selfie with a bear. Despite the risks, people continue to push boundaries, all for the sake of social media. The obsession with the perfect shot has turned landscapes into death traps and vacations into fatal risks. While sharks remain one of the ocean's top predators, your smartphone might just be more dangerous. And in the battle between human recklessness and nature's killers, there's probably only one winner there, isn't there? History feels vast, stretching back in an unbroken line of events so ancient that they seem impossible to grasp. But sometimes the timeline isn't as distant as it appears. One of the most mind-bending facts about history is that Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, lived closer to our modern world than she did to the construction of the Great Pyramid. Cleopatra VII, the famous Queen of Egypt, was born in 69 BCE and died in 30 BCE. During the time of Julius Caesar and the rise of the Roman Empire. By contrast, the Great Pyramid of Giza was completed around 2560 BCE, meaning that a staggering 2,500 years separated Cleopatra from its construction. That's more than the time span between her life and the invention of the iPhone in 2007, which came just 2,000 years after her death. It's a perspective-shattering realization. To Cleopatra, the Great Pyramid was as ancient as Stonehenge is to us today. today. By a time, Egypt had already lived through dynasties of kings, foreign invasions, and centuries of shifting cultures. The pyramids were already ruins, worn by time, looted by grave robbers, and standing as silent relics of an era long past. In fact, she likely saw them in the same way we see the crumbling remains of the Roman Empire, monuments to a civilization that had peaked long before her birth. To put it in even more startling terms, Cleopatra's life was closer to today's moon landings, modern skyscrapers, and artificial intelligence than the days when pharaohs commanded thousands of laborers to build the wonders of the ancient world. If she had somehow been able to look 2,500 years into the future, she would have seen our era of space exploration, global communication, and technological marvels, the same way that we now look back 2,500 years at the world of the pyramids. History is often thought of as a distant, disconnected past, but in reality, it moves like a living chain of events, connecting us in ways we rarely consider. The Great Pyramid stood long before Cleopatra's rule, and it still stands today, watching over a world she could have never imagined, a world that now holds technology, science, and wonders beyond even the grandest visions of ancient Europe. For most of us, a mirror is just an object, a tool that we use to check our hair, adjust our clothes, or catch a glimpse of ourselves as we pass by. But for those suffering from spectrophobia, a mirror is something far more sinister. It's a portal to terror, an object they will avoid at all costs. Even a fleeting glance at their reflection can make them panic. Spectrophobia, also known as isotropophobia, is an intense, irrational fear of mirrors, reflections, or even the idea of being watched through glass surfaces. Some sufferers are terrified of seeing their own face, while others believe that something else might be staring back at them. Unlike ordinary fears, this phobia isn't just mild discomfort, it is pure, unrelenting dread. One of the most infamous cases involved a woman who refused to enter rooms where she knew a mirror was present. If she accidentally caught her own reflection, she would scream, run, and suffer full-body tremors. Over time, she even covered all of the windows and polished surfaces in her home, fearing that something unnatural lurked in the glass. Others report a sensation of their reflection moving independently, or the belief that they might be looking at a distorted, monstrous version of themselves. The roots of this phobia are as eerie as the fear itself. Some cases are linked to trauma, particularly in individuals who are forced to confront their reflection in distressing situations, abuse, body dysmorphia, or even sleep paralysis experiences. In extreme cases, spectrophobia intertwines with hallucinations, leading sufferers to swear they've seen shadows, figures, or even grotesque versions of their own face staring back at them. Historically, mirrors have been tied to superstitions and horror legends. Many cultures believed mirrors could trap souls, summon spirits, or even steal a person's life force. The famous Bloody Mary urban legend is based on this fear, daring people to say a name in a mirror only to see a demonic entity appear behind them. Even in the Victorian era, it was common practice to cover all mirrors in a house after someone died to prevent their soul from becoming trapped in the glass. For those with spectrophobia, that's not just folklore. It's a daily nightmare. The fear is so overwhelming that some avoid public bathrooms, dressing rooms, or even the glass on their smartphone screens. In a world filled with reflective surfaces, living with this phobia is like constantly being hunted by your reflection, something you can never truly escape. You are never truly alone. Right now, at this very moment, your skin is home to tiny microscopic creatures that live, breed, and die on your face. They're called Demodex mites, and whether you like it or not, they've been with you your entire life. These 8-legged parasites burrow deep into your hair follicles, feeding on oils and dead skin cells while remaining completely invisible to the naked eye. There are two species that have adapted perfectly to human skin: Demodex folliculorum and Demodex brevis. The first prefers to live in eyelashes, eyebrows, and facial hair, while the second burrows even deeper, embedding itself inside your sebaceous glands. Each mite is less than 1/3 of a millimeter long, too small to see, yet numbering in the hundreds of thousands across your face and body. They crawl, they mate, and they even lay their eggs inside your pores, all without you ever feeling a thing. Which is incredibly disturbing. What makes Demodex even more unsettling is their bizarre life cycle. They have no anus, meaning they store all their waste inside their tiny bodies. When they die, usually after 2 weeks, their decomposing corpses burst open, releasing bacteria and waste directly into your skin. This process happens constantly, with new generations of mites replacing the old, ensuring that their microscopic colony never disappears completely. For the most part, Demodex mites are harmless. Nearly every adult human carries them, and they may even serve a purpose by helping us to clear away excess oils and dead skin. But when their populations grow out of control, often due to a weakened immune system, stress, or skin conditions like rosacea, they can trigger itching, inflammation, and even skin infections. Some researchers believe these mites could play a role in chronic skin conditions, though the exact relationship remains a mystery. Perhaps the most disturbing thought? You inherited these mites at birth. Studies suggest that newborns acquire them from their mothers through skin contact, meaning that from the very first moments of life, you were already home to a thriving ecosystem of microscopic passengers. So the next time you look in the mirror, remember, you're not just looking at yourself, you're looking at the countless creatures living on your skin, crawling through your pores, and waiting for their turn to die and release their microscopic remains back onto your face. And by remains, we mean their feces. We like to think of ourselves as unique. Our personalities, thoughts, and experiences all combine to make us distinctly us. But beneath the surface, at the most fundamental biological level, you are nearly identical to every single person on the planet. No matter where you're from, what you look like, or how different you believe yourself to be, 99.9% of your DNA is exactly the same as that of every other human being who has ever lived. That means the only thing separating you from a billionaire, a prisoner, an Olympic athlete, or a stranger on the other side of the world is just 0.1% of your genetic code. That tiny fraction is responsible for everything that makes you different: your eye color, height, skin tone, hair texture, even your susceptibility to certain diseases. But in the grand scheme of biology, those differences are microscopic. What's even more mind-blowing is that you share about 98.8% of your DNA with chimpanzees, meaning that you are genetically closer to a chimp than a mouse is to a rat. Even more bizarre, scientists have found that humans share around 60% of their genes with bananas. And if I was going to make a cheap joke about the mindless nature of some humans, I would insert it right here, but I'm not going to do that. I'm better than that. This 99.9% similarity between humans has staggering implications. It means that race is essentially a social construct, as the genetic difference between people of different ethnic backgrounds is so small that they're almost negligible. It means that your best friend and your worst enemy are practically genetic twins. It also raises pretty profound questions. If we are all nearly identical at a molecular level, why have humans spent so much of history fighting over differences that barely even exist? And yet, despite this overwhelming sameness, no two humans are exactly alike. Even identical twins who share nearly 100% of the genetic code develop slight variations in their DNA over time due to environmental factors and random mutations. Your body is constantly changing at the molecular level, meaning that the genetic you today isn't quite the genetic you from a year ago. So the next time you pass a stranger on the street, remember this: beneath the clothes, the language, the culture, they are almost an exact copy of you. The line between self and other is thinner than we'd like to admit. We are, quite literally, one species, one family. We're nearly the same person. As you watch this, you're probably hearing a voice in your head, your own personal narrator, shaping these words into a silent conversation. Hello there. It's the same voice that tells you what to say before you speak. It helps you rehearse arguments or even scolds you when you make a mistake. But here's something strange. Not everybody has this. There are people who have never experienced an internal monologue. There is no constant narration, no silent conversations, no replaying embarrassing moments in their heads. Sounds rather blissful, doesn't it? Instead, they think entirely in images, sensations, and abstract ideas. Their minds function more like a movie reel than a script, processing the world through visual flashes, colors, and raw emotion rather than words. For those with an inner voice, the idea of not having one seems impossible. How do they process thoughts? How do they make decisions? How do they even read without hearing the words in their heads? Yet these questions make just as little sense for the estimated 30 to 50% of people who lack an internal monologue. No, what? Many of them don't even realize that other people experience a constant internal dialogue until adulthood, often learning about it in casual conversations or stumbling upon online discussions. One famous example is author and professor Russell T. Herbert, who studied this phenomenon for decades. He found that some people experience zero inner speech and instead see their thoughts in vivid mental pictures. A person without an inner voice might solve a problem by imagining a flowchart or symbols instead of running through a sentence in their head. This leads to even stranger implications. Some people can hear songs in their minds, while others can't mentally recreate music at all. This is amazing! Some replay entire conversations in their heads word for word, while others only recall the gist of what was said, like a series of images summarizing the event. In extreme cases, people with aphantasia, a condition where they cannot visualize images, lack both an inner voice and mental pictures, navigating the world purely through emotion and sensory memory. So, what does this mean? It means that the way you experience reality is not universal. It's just your brain's version of normal. Imagine never being able to say, turn left or look to your right. Instead, every direction you give or receive is tied to the natural world, north, south, east, or west. For millions of people, this isn't a thought experiment, it's their reality. Certain indigenous languages completely lack words for left and right, instead are relying entirely on cardinal directions to navigate their world. One of the most famous examples comes from the Gugu Yimithirr people of Australia, a small indigenous group whose language does not contain words for relative directions like left and right. Instead, speakers instinctively use absolute directions for everything. If a Gugu Yimithirr speaker tells you to move, they won't say, take a step to your left, they'll say, take a step to the southwest. If asked where something is, they won't say it's on your right, but instead, it's to the northeast. At first, this seems incomprehensible if you've grown up in the left and right club. How could someone possibly think this way all the time? But incredibly, studies have shown that people who speak these languages develop an almost superhuman sense of direction. Even in unfamiliar locations, they can instinctively orient themselves, always knowing which way is north, south, east, or west, even when indoors. Researchers have tested Gugu Yimithirr speakers by spinning them around in circles blindfolded and then asking them to point north. They rarely get it wrong, and they're not alone. The Setlol people of Mexico and the Thalangai speakers of Papua New Guinea also lack words for left and right, instead thinking in absolute geographical terms. The difference in language fundamentally changes the way they experience the world. While most of us navigate using ourselves as a reference point, my left, your right, these groups see themselves as part of the larger landscape, always tethered to the Earth's natural orientation. But this also means that without a clear sense of direction, they can't function like we do. If you took a Gugu Yimithirr speaker and teleported them to an underground bunker without windows or landmarks, their entire concept of space would collapse. They don't just use cardinal directions, they think in them. Humans have diced with catastrophe a few times. We've come remarkably close to ending our own species through our own incompetence. Sounds like the plot of a Cold War thriller, but this ain't fiction. There is a live nuclear bomb missing somewhere in the ocean, and for more than 6 decades, no one has been able to find it. The incident occurred on February 5th, 1958, during a US Air Force training mission off the coast of Tybee Island, Georgia. A B-47 bomber carrying a Mark 15 nuclear bomb was conducting a simulated combat exercise when it collided with an F-86 fighter jet. The impact severely damaged the bomber, and the crew faced a terrifying choice: try to land with the bomb or drop it in the ocean to avoid a potential detonation on impact. With no safe way to land, the decision was made. The bomb was jettisoned into the waters off the coast of Savannah, Georgia. The crew noted the coordinates of where they dropped it, assuming it could be retrieved later. But when the Navy launched a search mission, the bomb was gone. Despite extensive efforts over the years, it's never been found. The Mark 15 bomb is no ordinary explosive. It was designed to deliver 100 times the power of Hiroshima. Official reports claim it was a dummy bomb with its plutonium core removed, meaning it theoretically couldn't trigger a full nuclear explosion. But not everyone's convinced. Declassified government documents from the 60s suggest that the bomb was in fact fully armed. If true, this means that somewhere off of the US coast, a nuclear weapon capable of annihilating a city is just out there waiting. Theories about what happened to the bomb range from it being buried under layers of silt on the ocean floor to the possibility that it was secretly recovered by another country. Some believe that if a nuclear detonation ever occurs in the area, it may not be an attack, but a bomb from a bygone era finally waking up. To this day, the US government maintains that the bomb poses no immediate danger, but experts warn that corrosion, underwater currents, or an unexpected disturbance could turn this lost relic into a catastrophe that's just waiting to happen. It was one of the most gruesome and horrifying spectacles in human history, a sacrifice so massive, so relentless, that rivers of blood were said to flow down the temple steps. In the year 1487, to mark the completion of the Great Pyramid of Tenochtitlan, Templo Maya, the Aztecs conducted a 4-day-long mass human sacrifice, a ritual so staggering in scale that it's estimated that between 20 and 80,000 people were killed. The event was meant to honor the gods, particularly the god of war and the sun. According to historical records, lines of prisoners stretched for miles, their fate sealed as they were led to the top of the pyramid, where high priests wielding obsidian knives cut out their beating hearts and held them up to the sky. The bodies were then tossed down the steep stone steps, where they piled up in an ever-growing heap at the base. Spanish chroniclers and indigenous accounts describe a nightmarish scene. Priests drenched in blood, smoke from burning incense thick in the air, and drums pounding endlessly, their rhythm drowning out the screams. As the sacrifices continued, the streets of Tenochtitlan, home to over 200,000 people at the time, were said to have run red with blood, staining the very foundations of the city. Could this death toll possibly be real, though? Historians debate the exact numbers, with some arguing that Spanish accounts may have exaggerated the scale to paint the Aztecs as bloodthirsty savages. However, even conservative estimates suggest that tens of thousands were sacrificed, an almost incomprehensible level of ritual slaughter. Mass sacrifices were common in Aztec culture, believed to keep the sun moving across the sky and prevent cosmic disaster. Prisoners of war were the preferred victims, with the Aztecs constantly at war with neighboring tribes, so they could have an endless supply of sacrificial offerings. Archaeological evidence supports these accounts. Excavations of the Templo Maya have uncovered pits filled with human skulls, remnants of infamous skull racks that once displayed the severed heads of thousands of victims. Some skulls bear distinctive cut marks, confirming that they were ritualistically sacrificed. For the Aztecs, this was not mere cruelty. It was a divine duty, a sacred transaction to sustain the gods. But for the victims, it was a brutal, inescapable fate. And for the Spanish, who arrived decades later, it was the ultimate justification to destroy an empire they saw as irredeemably soaked in blood. Death isn't instant. The body doesn't just shut down like a machine being switched off. It decays, it collapses, and in some cases, it even consumes itself. And no organ does this more dramatically than the brain. Within hours of death, your brain, everything that makes you you, begins to dissolve, breaking down in a desperate, irreversible collapse. Neuroscientists have discovered that the brain experiences a final surge of activity after the heart stops beating. It's as if, in those last moments, the mind desperately fights to stay alive, firing off one last sequence of electrical signals. Some scientists believe this could explain the sensations reported in near-death experiences, flashes of lights, tunnels, and relived memories. But within 5 minutes, without oxygen, the neurons begin to die en masse, triggering a catastrophic chain reaction. A study published in Annals of Neurology found that brain cells don't simply shut down, they start cannibalizing themselves. The process known as autolysis is what happens when cells are starved of oxygen and begin to self-destruct. The enzymes that once maintained your thoughts, memories, and emotions turn against you, liquefying brain tissue from the inside out. In 2018, researchers at the University of Illinois studied post-mortem brain activity and found something even stranger. Some brain cells actually become more active after death. These cells, known as zombie genes, continue functioning for several hours, growing and even forming new connections. It's as if, even as the rest of the body collapses, parts of the brain refuse to die quietly. The breakdown is horrifyingly fast. Within 30 minutes, the brain structure begins to collapse. Within hours, it has turned into a mushy, gelatinous mass. If left undisturbed, decomposition spreads as bacteria begin their work, breaking down the final traces of consciousness into nothing. For centuries, people believed in an afterlife, in the soul lingering after death, but the reality is far more disturbing. What was once your mind, your thoughts, your memories, dissolves into an unrecognizable sludge, never to exist again. I made a video on another channel I do called Casual Criminalist about him.
This is the most f***ed up thing that I've ever come across in my life.
3 years ago, this shit still haunts me. Pedro Alonso Lopez is one of the most chilling figures in criminal history. It's a name whispered in horror in the crime archives of South America. Dubbed the Monster of the Andes, Lopez confessed to one of the largest known crime sprees ever recorded, claiming responsibility for the deaths of hundreds of individuals across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. Despite these shocking confessions, he was released from prison in 1998 and has never been seen since. Born in Colombia in 1948, Lopez experienced a deeply troubled childhood that set the stage for a lifetime of disturbing behavior. Reports suggest he spent years drifting across borders, targeting young victims in remote areas, evading authorities by moving between countries. His activities continued undetected for years, largely because he operated in isolated communities where resources to investigate disappearances were limited. It wasn't until 1980 that Lopez was finally caught in Ecuador after a natural disaster unearthed hidden burial sites. Confronted with overwhelming evidence, he reportedly admitted to over 300 crimes, a number that shocked authorities. Skeptical of such an extreme claim, investigators followed his leads to multiple locations where remains were uncovered. Despite this, Lopez was convicted of far fewer cases than he'd confessed to, due to limitations in forensic evidence and jurisdictional boundaries. Perhaps the most unsettling part of this case is what happened next. Due to legal constraints in Ecuador at the time, the maximum sentence he could receive was 16 years in prison, far shorter than what might be expected for such a case today. In 1994, he was granted early release for good behavior. He was briefly detained in Colombia, but after a short period in a psychiatric hospital, he was released in 1998. And then he disappeared. His current whereabouts, if he's still alive that is, remain unknown. Some believe he assumed a new identity, while others suspect he may have continued his activities undetected. Authorities have issued intermittent warrants for his capture, but to this day he remains one of the most elusive figures in criminal history. For most of us, seeing someone get hurt triggers an emotional response. We cringe, we wince, or we feel sympathy to them. But for a rare group, watching someone else in pain is the same as experiencing it firsthand. Their brains don't just register emotions, they actually mirror their body's sensations. A punch to the stomach on TV, they double over in pain. Watching someone get a needle in their arm, they feel the prick in their own skin. This condition is known as mirror touch synesthesia, and for those who have it, the boundary between self and others barely exists. One of the most famous cases is Joel Salinas, a neurologist with mirror touch synesthesia. When treating patients, he doesn't just observe their symptoms, he physically feels them. If a person walks in with a broken leg, his own leg throbs with pain. If someone is paralyzed, he feels numbness spreading across his body. His work is a constant, exhausting experience of living other people's pain as if it were his own. But it's not just pain. Touch, movement, and even emotions can be mirrored. If someone with this condition sees a person being stroked, they feel that exact same sensation on their own body. Watching a friend yawn can make them physically tired. Seeing someone cry might cause them to choke up without warning. Scientists believe this occurs because of hyperactive mirror neurons, the brain cells responsible for empathy and imitation. In most people, these neurons activate internally when we relate to someone's experience, but in people with mirror touch synesthesia, they activate so intensely that the brain fails to separate what it sees from what it feels. Only about 2% of the population has this condition. For some, it's a gift and ability to deeply connect with others. For others, it's a curse, an endless bombardment of pain, joy, exhaustion, and relief, all borrowed from the people around them. It makes you wonder, if we all had it, would the world be a kinder place, or would we collapse under the weight of feeling everything? In most parts of the world, vanishing without a trace is nearly impossible. Surveillance cameras, digital footprints, financial records. Modern life leaves a trail that is fairly difficult to erase. However, in Japan, a deeply ingrained cultural phenomenon allows people to disappear completely and legally. It's called johatsu, which literally means evaporation. For decades, thousands of people have used johatsu to walk away from their lives, vanishing into the shadows of society without leaving a trace. Whether it's to escape debt, shame, abuse, or personal failure, those who choose to become johatsu-sha, evaporated people, leave behind their homes, families, and identities, often with no explanation. Some stage their disappearances meticulously, withdrawing cash in small amounts to avoid suspicion, erasing their digital presence, and severing all social ties before slipping into a new and anonymous existence. Others vanish suddenly, leaving behind only a note or just nothing at all. Unlike missing persons cases in the West, Japanese authorities rarely search for those who disappear voluntarily. Unless foul play is suspected, police consider johatsu a personal choice, meaning families desperate for answers often have no way to track down their lost loved ones. Private agencies specialize in finding the disappeared, but many cases go unsolved. Some families even hire night movers, underground services that help people vanish overnight, packing their belongings and relocating them to an undisclosed location before anyone notices they're gone. Jihatsu is often linked to cultural pressures in Japan, where financial, professional, or personal failure is deeply stigmatized. For those drowning in debt, facing divorce, or disgraced by scandal, disappearing offers an escape without confrontation. Many of the vanished find refuge in cheap cash-only rental apartments in cities like Tokyo and Osaka, places known as hidden villages, where landlords ask no questions and identities are left at the door. The phenomenon became especially widespread during Japan's economic crash of the 1990s, when thousands of bankrupt business owners, overwhelmed by shame, chose disappearance over dishonor. Today, modern versions of Jihatsu continue, fueled by personal crises and the crushing pressure of social expectations. Many who vanish are never found. Their families keep waiting, hoping, searching. Before they evaporated, the past is a life they've erased, and they have no intention of being found. The bonds between a mother and an unborn child is often described as powerful, but science has uncovered something even more astonishing. A fetus can actually help heal its mother from the inside. If a pregnant woman experiences organ damage, whether from disease, injury, or even heart failure, the fetus can send its own stem cells to repair her body. This impossible process was first observed in studies on fetal microchimerism, a condition where fetal cells migrate into the mother's bloodstream and integrate into her tissues. Unlike normal stem cells, which require transplantation and a perfect genetic match to be effective, fetal cells appear to be uniquely designed to assist the mother's body. Researchers found fetal cells embedded in mothers' hearts, livers, brains, and even bone marrow, sometimes decades after giving birth. One of the most fascinating cases was documented in 2015, when scientists discovered male DNA inside the brain of a woman who had given birth to a son years earlier. This wasn't a mutation or an illness. It was fetal cells from her pregnancy still actively present in her body long after the baby was born. In another study, researchers found that fetal cells helped heal heart tissue in pregnant women who had suffered cardiac events, acting as an internal repair system. Even more mind-blowing, these cells continue to exist in the mother for the rest of her life. This means that even after childbirth, a mother carries biological traces of her child inside her body forever. Some scientists believe this may explain why women who have been pregnant are less likely to develop certain diseases, as the fetal cells continue working behind the scenes, reinforcing the mother's immune system and tissue regeneration capabilities. But this also leads to strange implications. Could this fetal-maternal cell transfer influence a mother's emotions, thoughts, or even personality? Some researchers speculate that these microscopic remnants of pregnancy might play a role in maternal instincts, postnatal depression, or even long-term health benefits. The connection between mother and child isn't just emotional or biological, it's cellular, embedded deep within her body, possibly for the rest of her existence. The next time someone says a mother carries a part of her child with her forever, they are speaking the literal truth. Right now, as you read this, there is a chance that someone near you has a ticking time bomb inside their skull. They don't feel sick, they have no symptoms, they could be laughing, working, or sipping their morning coffee, completely unaware that a deadly rupture could happen any second. This is the terrifying reality of brain aneurysms, and they are far more common than most people realize. Studies estimate that roughly 1 in 50 people have a brain aneurysm at this very moment. That means that across the world, millions of people are carrying a potentially fatal condition without knowing it. An aneurysm is essentially a weak, balloon-like bulge in a blood vessel in the brain. Most never cause problems, but when they rupture, the consequences are devastating. In an instant, blood floods the brain, triggering a hemorrhagic stroke that kills 50% of victims within 24 hours. Many never make it to hospital. Of those who survive, 2/3 suffer permanent brain damage and disability. The horror of an aneurysm is that it gives little to no warning. Unlike heart disease or cancer, which often present clear symptoms, an unruptured aneurysm is usually silent. Some people only find out they have one by accident through an MRI scan for an unrelated issue. Others never get the chance. Take Emilia Clarke, the actress from Game of Thrones. At just 24 years old, she suffered a ruptured brain aneurysm and nearly died. She underwent multiple brain surgeries to survive, an ordeal that left her with memory loss, extreme pain, and the terrifying knowledge that another aneurysm could form at any time. Even more scary is that aneurysms don't discriminate. They strike the young, the old, the fit, the unhealthy. Certain risk factors do increase the chances of rupture: high blood pressure, smoking, excessive alcohol use, and genetic predisposition. However, many victims have no known risk factors at all. Right now, someone you know may be carrying an undetected aneurysm completely unaware. It could rupture in a year, in a decade, or it could never rupture. There's no way to predict it. A sudden headache, dizziness, or blurred vision could be the only warning before everything fades to black. It's a grim reminder that something fragile is holding us together inside each of us, and for some, it's only a matter of time before it breaks. Death is final. At least, that's what most of us believe. In the Western world, when someone dies, they are laid to rest, sealed in a grave, or cremated, and their remains are untouched forever. But in certain parts of the world, burial isn't the end. Instead, families regularly dig up their dead loved ones, dress them in new clothes, groom them, and pose with them for photographs as if they never left. This practice, known as manin, takes place among the Toraja people of Indonesia, a group with some of the most unique and elaborate death rituals on Earth. In Torajan culture, the dead are not considered truly gone. They are simply in a different state of existence, still part of the family, still deserving of care. Every few years, families open their ancestral tombs, gently lift out their deceased relatives, some of whom have been dead for decades, and begin an extraordinary ritual of love and remembrance. The bodies, often remarkably well preserved due to dry burial conditions, are carefully cleaned, and their skin, though leathery and sunken, is wiped down with cloths, and their fragile limbs are repositioned, their faces lovingly dusted free of debris. Then comes the transformation. New clothes, sunglasses, hats, even cigarettes are placed between their lips. Some families even prop them up, standing, posing for fresh family photos, as if time never took them away. To outsiders, this may seem macabre, even horrifying perhaps, but to the Toraja, this ritual is an act of deep respect and devotion. The dead are not something to be feared or forgotten. They are part of the living family, just in a different form. In some cases, people will speak to their deceased relatives, update them on family affairs, ask for blessings, or even gently scold them for leaving too soon. The Toraja believe that death is not a single moment, but a gradual process, and until a proper funeral can be afforded, sometimes after years of saving, the deceased is kept in the home, treated as if they are still alive. Food's brought to them, they are spoken to, and their presence is honored. Only once the grand funeral takes place, often a week-long celebration involving buffalo sacrifices, dancing, and feasting, is the person truly considered at rest. In a world that often shuns death, Manin offers a different perspective, a culture where the dead are not gone, they're simply waiting, still a part of the family, still present in the lives of those they left behind. You're drifting off to sleep, your body sinking into the mattress, your mind slipping into that in-between state where reality and dreams blur. Suddenly, a deafening explosion shatters the silence, a gunshot, a thunderclap, a blaring alarm, you jolt awake, heart racing, gasping for breath. But there's nothing. There's no sound, there's no sign of danger, just an eerie, crushing silence. Your mind created it. That's exploding head syndrome, or EHS, a bizarre and terrifying sleep disorder where people hear loud, sudden noises just as they're falling asleep or waking up. The sounds are completely imaginary, but to the person experiencing them, they feel as real as any external noise. Some describe it as an electrical explosion inside their skull, others as a violent bang, a roar, or even voices screaming their name. It can happen once in a lifetime or multiple times in a night, leaving sufferers in a state of confusion, panic, and insomnia. Despite its dramatic name, exploding head syndrome doesn't actually cause physical harm, but it can be deeply unsettling, as you might imagine. For centuries, people who experienced it feared they were going insane. In medieval times, some believed it was a demonic force shrieking into their ears, while others thought it was a divine warning or a premonition of death. Even today, sufferers report feelings of paranoia, waking up convinced that they heard a gunshot, an intruder, or a bomb, only to realize that they are completely alone. So what causes this eerie condition? Scientists believe that it's linked to dysfunctions in the brain's auditory processing system, particularly during the transition between wakefulness and sleep. Usually, as we fall asleep, the brain shuts down different sensory systems in a gradual, orderly process. But in EHS sufferers, something misfires. Instead of a smooth transition, the brain explodes with sudden neural activity, creating the illusion of a loud noise. Some researchers even have suggested that EHS could be related to sleep paralysis. Some conditions occur in altered states of consciousness and often leave sufferers with the feeling of deep dread. Though the condition isn't fully understood, one thing is clear. For those who experience it, sleep is no longer a place of peace. While most children are in school, playing with friends, or just simply being kids, over 160 million children worldwide are trapped in grueling, often dangerous labor, forced to work instead of learning, growing, and dreaming of a future. These are not part-time chores or after-school jobs. This is exploitation at its worst, with millions of children working in mines, factories, sweatshops, farms, and even war zones. Some of the most harrowing cases come from West Africa, where thousands of children are trafficked and forced to work on cocoa plantations, harvesting the beans that fuel the world's chocolate industry. Many of these children, some as young as 5 years old, work long hours with machetes in their hands, carrying heavy loads and enduring beatings from overseers. They are often sold or lured with false promises taken from their families and left in remote farms where escape is nearly impossible. In South Asia, children toil in black kilns, carpet weaving industries, and dangerous garment factories, working 12 to 16-hour days for mere pennies. Many suffer from respiratory diseases, chronic pain, and malnutrition, their bodies breaking under the weight of forced labor. Others are sent into illegal mines, descending into the darkness with no protective gear, inhaling toxic dust, and risking death every time they go underground. Even more disturbing, some children are used for armed conflicts, recruited as child soldiers, and forced to kill or be killed in wars they barely understand. In places like the Democratic Republic of the Congo and South Sudan, boys are kidnapped and trained to become fighters, while girls are often exploited in equally horrific ways. By the time they are freed, if they ever are, their childhood is gone, replaced by trauma and scars, both physical and psychological. What makes this reality even worse? Many of the products we use every day, our clothes, our coffee, our electronics, are touched by child labor. Tech companies rely on cobalt mining in the Congo, where children dig for hours to extract materials used in smartphones and laptops. The fashion industry sources cheap garments made in sweatshops where children work in stifling, unsafe conditions. Despite international efforts to fight child labor, the numbers remain staggering. Poverty, corruption, and corporate greed continue to fuel the cycle of exploitation. Many children will never escape this life. They will grow old before their time, working themselves to death while the world looks away. It's easy to believe child labor is a thing of the past, but right now, at this very moment, millions of children are being robbed of their futures, working in shadows, unseen and unheard. In one of the wealthiest countries on Earth, hundreds of thousands sleep on the streets every night. They curl up in doorways, under bridges, in cars they no longer can afford to keep running. Meanwhile, millions of homes sit empty, collecting dust, waiting for buyers who may never come. It's an unsettling paradox. In the United States, there are more vacant homes than there are homeless people by a staggering margin. According to recent data, there are over 15 million vacant housing units across the US, ranging from abandoned properties to investment homes left untouched by speculators. Compare that to the more than 771,800 people experiencing homelessness on any given night, a number that has continued to rise in recent years. It's pretty shocking stuff. That means there are roughly 28 empty homes for every one homeless person. So why isn't this crisis being solved? And the answer lies in capitalism, policy failures, and systemic greed. Many of these homes aren't empty because they're unlivable. They sit unused because they've been bought as speculative investments, waiting for their value to increase before being resold for profit. Large corporations and wealthy investors snatch up properties, pricing out working-class families, while the actual number of available, affordable homes dwindles. In cities like San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles, where homelessness has reached crisis levels, thousands of luxury apartments remain vacant. They aren't meant to be lived in. They're financial assets, part of a global market where housing is treated like stocks, not shelter. Meanwhile, tent cities continue to grow, filled with people whose rising rent, medical bills, or sudden job loss have pushed them out. And it's not just urban centers. Entire neighborhoods in places like Detroit and St. Louis have been abandoned, houses boarded up and decaying, while nearby people sleep in their cars or under freeway overpasses. The situation has become so extreme that some cities have even proposed radical solutions, forcibly taking vacant homes and redistributing them to the unhoused. Yet policies like this face intense pushback from real estate lobbyists and landlords who would rather let homes sit empty than allow them to be used for public good. The result is a country where shelter is not a right, it's a privilege, one that can be withheld, hoarded, and turned into a profit-making scheme. If every vacant home were opened to someone in need, homelessness in the US could effectively be eliminated overnight. But for now, the streets remain full, the houses remain empty, and the system remains broken. Now, we often think of war, violence, and terrorism as the greatest threats to human life, senseless destruction played out on the global stage. But what if the real killer was something much quieter, something so common, so preventable, yet so devastating that it takes more lives every day than all wars, murders, and terror attacks combined? And that silent killer is hunger. Every single day, roughly 25,000 people die from hunger-related causes. That's one person every 3 seconds. A child, a mother, an elderly man, collapsing not from bullets or explosions, but from the slow, agonizing process of starvation. By comparison, an estimated 500 to 600,000 people die each year from war and violence, a number that, while horrifying, is still dwarfed by the 9 million people who die from hunger annually. And yet, the world produces enough food to feed everyone. There's no true scarcity, only inequality, waste, economic greed. Wealthy nations throw away billions of tons of food yearly. Supermarkets discard unsold produce and restaurants trash perfectly edible meals, all while entire communities in parts of Africa, South Asia, and even the US go to bed without eating. Some of the worst hit places are in war-torn regions like Yemen, South Sudan, and Afghanistan, where conflicts disrupt food supply chains and force families into starvation. But hunger isn't just a crisis of war zones. It exists in every country, even in the richest nations on Earth. In the US, over 34 million people, including 9 million children, face food insecurity, meaning they don't know when or where their next meal will come from. The cruel irony is the cost of ending world hunger is estimated at $40 billion per year, less than what the world spends on luxury goods in a single week. Governments and corporations have the means to fix this crisis, but hunger is not just a lack of food, it's a symptom of a broken system that values profit over human life. So while wars make headlines and acts of terrorism dominate news cycles, the real war, the war against hunger, kills more people than all of them combined. Most people think of human evolution as a straight line, a gradual progression from primitive ancestors to modern Homo sapiens. But the truth is far stranger. For most of history, we weren't alone. At least 8 different species of humans once walked the Earth at the same time, each with their own cultures, tools, and ways of life. Yet today, it's just us. One of our closest relatives was the Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, a robust and intelligent species that thrived across Europe and Asia for over 400,000 years. They hunted, they made tools, they buried their dead. But about 40,000 years ago, they vanished. Some were likely absorbed into our own species through interbreeding, but the rest were wiped out. Whether by climate change, competition, or even conflict with early Homo sapiens, their extinction remains a mystery. Then there were the Denisovans, an elusive species that lived in Asia around the same time. We know they existed because of fragments, a finger bone, a few teeth, and traces of their DNA in modern humans. Unlike Neanderthals, no complete Denisovan skeleton has ever been found, but their genetic imprint lingers in Tibetan and Melanesian populations, giving some people a unique ability to survive at high altitudes. Even stranger was Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbits for their tiny 3-foot-tall stature. They lived on the Indonesian island of Flores until about 50,000 years ago, coexisting with our ancestors. Some researchers believed they survived even longer, their legend possibly inspiring local myths of small, forest-dwelling creatures. And there were others: Homo erectus, Homo luzonensis, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo naledi, all gone, leaving behind bones, tools, and speculation. What made us the last species standing? Well, some theories suggest it was our adaptability, our social structures, or even our ability to wage war against competitors. Others wonder if the answer's darker, that we systematically wiped them out as Homo sapiens expanded across the globe. Were we collectively responsible for the world's first genocide? It's a chilling thought that will make you think twice about every stranger you've ever passed on the street, stood next to in an elevator, or brushed shoulders with in a crowded subway. Statistically speaking, the average person will unknowingly walk past at least 16 murderers in their lifetime. And this isn't some urban legend or exaggerated scare tactic. It is based on real crime data. In countries like the US, the UK, and Australia, where crime rates have been extensively studied, forensic experts have estimated that the sheer number of unsolved murders, unconvicted criminals, and repeat offenders means that many people have, at some point, crossed paths with a killer and never even realized it. I mean, think about it. Murderers don't always resemble the monsters we imagine. They don't have blood on their hands or a sinister glint in their eyes. Many blend into society, working regular jobs, raising families, going to the grocery store, and living completely normal lives while carrying a really dark secret. Some have killed in moments of rage, others are cold, calculating predators hiding in plain sight, and some, they'll kill again. Take Israel Keys, a seemingly ordinary construction worker from Alaska who traveled across the US killing random victims, often burying kill kits filled with weapons near his future crime scenes. He smiled at cashiers, made small talk with gas station attendants, and probably walked past hundreds of people who had no idea they were inches away from a serial killer. Then there's Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, who led a completely double life, working as a city compliance officer, serving as president of his church congregation, and even lecturing people about home security while secretly committing a string of brutal murders. His neighbors thought he was just an ordinary guy until the truth came out. But it's not just serial killers. Many murderers commit a single crime, never get caught, and live out the rest of their lives in complete anonymity. Some kill out of desperation, some in crimes of passion, others in calculated silence. They slip through the system, never suspected, never brought to justice. So look around the next time you're walking through a crowded street, sitting in a packed restaurant, or waiting in line at a coffee shop. You could be standing just feet away from someone who's taken a life. And the scariest part? You'd never know it. You think of yourself as one person, one singular being, but in reality your body is more like a walking ecosystem, a biological metropolis teeming with trillions of microscopic inhabitants. At any given moment, more than half the cells in your body are not even human. They're bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other microorganisms that outnumber your own cells and play a crucial role in keeping you alive. The average human body is made up of about 30 trillion human cells, an almost incomprehensible number, but lurking within you, inhabiting your skin, gut, mouth, and even your bloodstream, is a vast microbial universe. Estimates suggest that the human microbiome, your personal collection of bacteria, contains around 38 trillion bacterial cells. Some scientists argue the ratio may be closer to 50-50, but either way, the fact remains, you are just as much bacteria as you are human. Now, most of these microbes reside in your gut, where they form a thriving community that directly impacts your digestion, immune system, mental health, even your personality. Without these microscopic tenants, you couldn't properly break down food, absorb nutrients, or fight off infections. Some studies have even linked gut bacteria to mood disorders like depression and anxiety, suggesting that the microbes in your intestines may have more influence over your emotions than you realize. But while some bacteria are essential for survival, others can turn against you. If your microbiome becomes imbalanced due to antibiotics, stress, poor diet, or illness, harmful bacteria can multiply, leading to infections, chronic inflammation, and even neurological conditions. Some researchers believe gut bacteria may play a role in diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and autoimmune disorders. Even weirder is that some bacteria in your body aren't even native to humans. Scientists have found that certain microbes living in your gut share DNA with bacteria from soil, deep-sea environments, and even other animal species. Over millions of years, bacteria have been passed between organisms, making your microbiome a living fossil of ancient microbial evolution. This all means that you are not just a single being, but a symbiotic collection of trillions of life forms coexisting in a delicate balance. Without them, you would die. With them, you thrive. And in a way, you are less of an individual and more of a superorganism, a walking, breathing planet of microscopic life. It defies all logic. Most people feel fear, disgust, or at best morbid curiosity when confronted with the horrors of a serial killer. But for a select few, that reaction is something far weirder. It's lustful desire. This is hybristophilia, a rare psychological condition where individuals experience intense sexual attraction to criminals, especially violent criminals. It's not just an odd quirk, it's a documented phenomenon, and history is filled with chilling examples. Ted Bundy, one of the most infamous serial killers of all time, received hundreds of love letters in prison. During his trial, women lined up outside the courthouse, giggling and dressed in his preferred type of hairstyle and clothing. Even as he stood accused of brutally murdering dozens of women, admirers swooned over his charm, his intelligence. One woman Carol Ann Boone even married Bundy while he was on death row and later gave birth to his child. And Bundy isn't the only one. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, had an entire fan club, women writing to him in prison, some even sending explicit photos. One woman married him in San Quentin despite his horrific crimes. Jeffrey Dahmer, who killed and mutilated his victims, also had admirers sending him love letters. Even Charles Manson, the cult leader who orchestrated multiple murders, was engaged to a young woman decades after his conviction. So what drives this disturbing attraction? Psychologists believe that there are two main types of ebristophiles. Passive ebristophiles are individuals who are attracted to violent criminals but wouldn't engage in crime themselves. They may believe they can change the killer or that they see the real person beneath the violence. This is common among those who romanticize notorious killers, seeing them as misunderstood rather than monstrous. Aggressive ebristophiles are much rarer and are far more dangerous. These individuals actively encourage violent behavior and may even seek out relationships with criminals in hopes of being a part of their crimes. In extreme cases, some have helped killers commit murder. This condition is unsettling because it goes against every survival instinct. Why would someone be sexually drawn to danger, to murder? Some researchers suggest it's a mix of psychological trauma, a need for control, or even a fascination with power and dominance. Others believe it's rooted in a warped version of love and loyalty, where the attraction is tied to a deep-seated desire to be special, chosen by someone, feared by the world. Whatever the reason, ebristophilia is not just a twisted fantasy. It's a documented, a real psychological phenomenon. And as long as serial killers exist, there will be those who don't just fear them, but fall in love with them. The human brain is often compared to a computer, but the reality is far more staggering. Your brain is not just a processor, it is the most advanced data storage and retrieval system on Earth. Scientists estimate that the brain can hold around 2.5 petabytes or 2.5 million gigabytes of information, meaning that inside your skull you have the equivalent storage capacity of the entire internet as it existed in 2010. To put that in perspective, a single petabyte could hold 13.3 years of continuous 4K video. 2 petabytes could store every book, article, and written work in human history. 2.5 petabytes is roughly equivalent to 3 million hours of TV shows or 500 billion pages of text. But here's where it gets genuinely mind-blowing. Unlike a hard drive, the brain doesn't store information in a rigid linear format. Instead, memories and knowledge are layered, interconnected, and dynamic, meaning that your brain isn't just storing raw data, it's constantly rewiring, reorganizing, and optimizing information for better retrieval. Neuroscientists believe that the average brain contains around 86 billion neurons, and each neuron can form thousands of connections with others, creating a neural network of around a quadrillion or 1,000 trillion synapses. This massively parallel structure allows for real-time data processing, adaptive learning, and nearly limitless storage potential. Unlike a computer which slows down as storage fills up, the human brain becomes more efficient the more information it processes, as long as it remains healthy. And most of this capacity goes completely unused. Studies suggest that we only consciously process about 10% of the sensory data that we take in, with the rest stored passively, waiting for recall. Some people with photographic memories or savant syndrome may be tapping into a larger fraction of this storage, retrieving vast amounts of detail that the average person's brain filters out. But despite its unimaginable potential, the brain remains a mystery to science. How can it recall childhood memories decades later? Why do certain smells instantly transport us back in time? Could we one day unlock the full storage power of the brain, or even transfer human memories like digital files? For now, what we do know is that the human brain is the most advanced organic storage system ever discovered, one that not even the most powerful supercomputers have come close to replicating. There's depravity. And then there's Albert Fish, one of the most disturbing figures in criminal history, a man whose crimes were so grotesque that they continue to haunt true crime records to this day. His actions alone were enough to cement his name among history's most infamous criminals, but what makes his case even more unsettling is the letter he sent to the mother of one of his victims. In 1928, 10-year-old Grace Budd disappeared after her family allowed her to attend what they believed was a birthday party, accompanied by Fish, who had posed as a kind and well-meaning benefactor. The Budds never saw their daughter again. For 6 agonizing years, they held on to hope that she might still be alive, until one day, a letter arrived at their home. It was unsigned, handwritten, and filled with horrific details that shattered any remaining hope they had. Fish described in excruciating detail how he had taken Grace to an abandoned house, keeping her isolated and terrified, before ultimately ending her life, before adding that he cooked her body and ate it over a period of 9 days. The contents of the letter were so graphic that authorities withheld some portions from the public, but the key detail they needed was there. The distinctive writing matched previous communications from Fish, giving investigators the break that they'd been waiting for. When Fish was finally arrested, he showed no remorse for his crimes. He openly admitted to his actions in court, offering explanations that were as unsettling as the crimes themselves. He claimed that he was acting under divine instruction, a justification that did little to lessen the horror of what he'd done. Even experienced law enforcement officials struggled to process the full extent of his crimes. He was directly linked with 2 other murders after his arrest, while there were countless more where he was suspected. Fish was sentenced to death and executed in the electric chair in 1936. His final words, bizarre and detached from reality, were reported as, "I don't even know why I'm here." To this day, his letter remains one of the most infamous documents in criminal history, a written confession so grotesque it defies belief. A chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity. What happens when we die? For centuries, people who have come close to death have reported eerily similar experiences. A tunnel of light, a feeling of weightlessness, vivid hallucinations, encounters with deceased loved ones, or even a sense of merging with the universe. These experiences have fueled religious beliefs, spiritual awakenings, and theories of an afterlife. But modern science suggests there may be a biochemical explanation lurking deep inside the brain. Dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, is one of the most powerful psychedelic substances known to man, capable of inducing intensely vivid, otherworldly hallucinations. It's the active compound in ayahuasca, a shamanic brew used for centuries in Amazonian spiritual rituals. But here's the strange part. DMT isn't just found in plants, it's also produced naturally by the human brain. For years, researchers suspected that DMT plays a role in dreaming and altered states of consciousness, but a groundbreaking 2019 study confirmed something even more shocking. The mammalian brain floods with DMT during the dying process. Scientists at the University of Michigan observed massive spikes of DMT in the brains of rats at the moment of death, suggesting that the same surge could happen in humans. This could explain the near-death experience, or NDE phenomenon, where people describe out-of-body sensations, life review flashes, and encounters with mystical beings. These aren't just hallucinations. They are eerily similar to the visions reported by people who take synthetic or plant-based DMT. Many users of ayahuasca or synthetic DMT describe seeing geometric patterns or alien-like entities and feeling a profound sense of unity with the universe, experiences that mirror accounts from people who have been revived from clinical death. Even stranger, some cultures have long believed that DMT is the spirit molecule, a natural gateway between life and death. Indigenous Amazonian tribes have used it for centuries in ritualistic journeys to the afterlife, claiming it allows shamans to communicate with spirits. So what's this mean? If DMT is released in the final moments of life, could the afterlife simply be a biochemical reaction? One final, powerful hallucination created by our own brains? Or could this compound be something more, a biological mechanism designed to transition consciousness beyond death? Science has yet to fully answer the mystery, but one thing is clear. The experience of dying may not be darkness and silence, but a kaleidoscope of visions, colors, and sensations, unlike anything we can imagine. Your body is comprised of about 37.2 trillion cells, and inside nearly every one of them is a complete set of DNA, a molecular blueprint that holds the instructions for building and maintaining you. What most people don't realize, though, is just how absurdly long DNA actually is. Each human cell contains about 6 feet, or 2 meters of DNA, coiled tightly into a microscopic nucleus. That might not sound like a lot, but when you multiply by the trillions of cells in your body, the number becomes almost impossible to comprehend. If all the DNA in your body were unraveled and laid out end to end, it would stretch for almost 10 billion miles, far enough to reach Pluto and back 16 times. To put that into perspective, your DNA could make the journey between the Earth and the Moon over 150,000 times, or from the Earth to the Sun and back 61 times. And yet, All of this mind-boggling length is packed into a single body, folded so efficiently that it fits inside your cells without tangling or breaking. The way DNA coils and compags itself is so advanced that if scientists could replicate it in data storage, we could store the entire internet in something the size of a sugar cube. Although long enough to stretch across the solar system, your entire genetic code is written using only 4 chemical letters, A, T, C, and G. Every trait, every characteristic, every biological process in your body is dictated by sequences of these 4 molecules arranged in an order more complex than any computer code ever created. So next time you look up at the stars, remember this. The very molecules that make you who you are could, in theory, stretch across the vast emptiness of space and back again. Brilliant. No, this isn't one for the squeamish. The Vikings were known for their fierce warriors, brutal raids, and ruthless punishments, but perhaps the most horrifying of all their execution methods was the infamous Blood Eagle, a form of torture so nightmarish that some historians debate whether it was even real or just a gruesome legend meant to strike terror into their enemies. According to medieval Norse sagas, the Blood Eagle was reserved for the most hated enemies and betrayers. The execution was not just about killing, it was meant to send a message of ultimate agony and humiliation. Here's how it worked. The victim was restrained, usually by tying their hands and legs to keep them immobile. Then, the executioner used a sharp blade to slice open the skin along the spine, exposing the rib cage. Then, one by one, the ribs were severed from the spine and then bent backward, forming grotesque wings made of bone and flesh. And then with the ribcage peeled open, the lungs were pulled out and spread across the back, still attached, so that they would flutter as the victim took their final gasping breaths. No mercy was given to these victims. They were left to die in unimaginable agony, their own body turned into a twisted display of suffering. Some accounts suggest that salt was rubbed into the wounds to prolong the pain, ensuring that the victim remained conscious for as long as possible. The Blood Eagle is described in several Viking sagas, including the execution of King Eilar of Northumbria, who was said to have been killed this way after he executed Ragnar Lothbrok, a legendary Viking warrior. The sons of Ragnar allegedly captured King Eilar and subjected him to this gruesome fate as revenge. But did the Blood Eagle really happen? Some historians argue that it may have been exaggerated or even fabricated in later retellings. The method seems so impossibly brutal that many believe it could have been a symbolic description of violent vengeance rather than a literal act. Others argue that it could have been ritualistic human sacrifice rather than a standard method of execution. Whether it was real or not, the fear it instilled was very real. Even hearing the threat of a Blood Eagle execution was enough to send Viking enemies into submission. If it did happen, it would be one of the most horrifying forms of torture ever recorded. Deep in the remote highlands of Papua New Guinea, a terrifying disease once spread through the Four People, a tribe with a unique and deadly tradition: ritualistic cannibalism. The disease was called Kuru, and it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Meaning to tremble in the Four language, Kuru was a rare and fatal neurodegenerative disorder caused by eating human brains. It belonged to a group of conditions known as prion diseases, which attack the brain like a slow-moving infection, turning brain tissue into a sponge riddled with microscopic holes. Kuru did not kill instantly. It crept in slowly like a curse. The first symptoms were minor: muscle twitching, unsteady movement, and a slight tremor in the hands. But over time, it took complete control of the body. Victims lost coordination, their speech became garbled, and their muscles refused to obey them. Then came the most terrifying symptom: uncontrollable, hysterical laughter. They would laugh even as their own bodies wasted away, even as their families watched them deteriorate with no way to help. Some lay in their huts shaking and giggling like broken dolls, trapped in a cycle of tremors and hysteria. Eventually, the paralysis set in, and within 12 months of the first symptoms, the victim slipped into a vegetative state and died. For centuries, the Four People practiced ritual endo-cannibalism, consuming the bodies of their deceased relatives as an act of respect and mourning. Women and children in particular ate their brains, unknowingly taking in the very thing that would lead to their suffering. Prions, the infectious agent responsible for Kuru, were not viruses or bacteria. They were misfolded proteins, corrupting normal brain cells and turning them into self-replicating killers. There was no cure, no treatment, and no mercy. Entire generations began vanishing. Villages lost their women and children at alarming rates. Western scientists first documented Kuru in the 1950s, when doctors studying the Four People realized that hundreds were dying from a condition with no known cause. Eventually, they traced it back to the practice of cannibalism. Once it was banned, cases of Kuru nearly disappeared. But the horror wasn't over. Prions can remain in the body for decades before symptoms appear. Some who consumed infected brain matter in the 60s and 70s only started showing signs of the disease years later. Though kuru is now rare, its legacy remains. It was a disease that turned a sacred ritual into a death sentence, proving that our own biology can betray us in the most nightmarish ways. And while kuru is largely gone, its relatives, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease and mad cow disease, still exist, reminding us that prions are among the most unstoppable killers known to science. Something strange is happening to the human body. Just a few decades ago, peanut allergies were almost unheard of, gluten intolerance was rare, and severe allergic reactions were anomalies. Today, food allergies, asthma, and seasonal sensitivities have exploded across the world, with rates doubling or even tripling in many countries, and no one fully understands why. In the 1980s, only about 3% of the population had food allergies. Now, that number is closer to 10% in Western nations. Hospital admissions for anaphylactic shock have increased by 700% in some areas. Children who would have eaten peanut butter without a second thought in the 90s now carry EpiPens, constantly at risk of life-threatening reactions. Even common seasonal allergies have surged. More people than ever suffer from severe hay fever, animal allergies, and dust mite sensitivities. The leading theory behind the mysterious rise, strange as it might seem, is that modern life has made us too clean. Known as the hygiene hypothesis, scientists believe that as we scrub away germs, sterilize our environments, and douse our homes in antibacterial products, we may have accidentally sabotaged our immune systems. Our ancestors lived in dirtier conditions, exposed to bacteria, parasites, and natural microbes that helped regulate the immune response. Without these exposures, our bodies may be overreacting to harmless substances, mistaking pollen, food proteins, and pet dander as deadly invaders. Another disturbing factor could be pollution and climate change. Studies show that higher carbon dioxide levels are making plants produce more potent allergens, meaning the pollen floating through air today is stronger and more irritating than it was a few decades ago. Urban pollution also triggers more aggressive immune responses, making allergies worse in city dwellers than in rural areas. Even the food we eat may be playing a role. Processed foods, artificial additives, and altered gut bacteria could all be influencing our immune systems in ways we don't fully understand. Some scientists suggest that early exposure to allergens, like feeding infants peanuts and eggs, could help prevent allergies from developing later on. Yet, in an ironic twist, decades of advice telling parents to avoid these foods may have actually contributed to the explosion of allergies. The most unsettling part of this is there's no clear end in sight. If current trends continue, the future could be one where severe allergies are the norm and not the exception. Scientists are racing to understand what's happening, but for now, we are living in an era where the human immune system seems to be turning against itself, overreacting to the world it was once perfectly adapted to survive in. Now, when most people think of slavery, they imagine a dark chapter from the past, ancient empires built on forced labor, the transatlantic slave trade, chains, auctions, and plantations. But the horrifying truth is that slavery never ended. It just changed form. Right now, in the modern world, an estimated 40 to 50 million people are living in slavery, more than at any other time in human history. This is not an exaggeration. Slavery today exists in factories, farms, brothels, homes, and even corporate supply chains. It's not always in the form of whips and shackles, but it's just as brutal. Human beings bought, sold, and trapped in lives they cannot escape. One of the largest forms of modern slavery is forced labor. Millions of people work in horrific conditions producing goods for industries ranging from fast fashion to electronics, agriculture, and seafood. Some are trapped by debt bondage, a system where workers are told they must pay off a never-ending debt through labor, ensuring they can never leave. Many of the products we use daily, clothes, chocolate, coffee, even smartphones, may have been touched by slave labor somewhere along the supply chain. The terrifying reality is that modern slavery is not just happening in distant countries. It exists in every nation on Earth, even in wealthy, developed societies. Victims may be hidden in plain sight, working as housekeepers in luxury homes, trapped in illegal sweatshops, or controlled by traffickers who threaten them with violence. In the United States and Europe, human trafficking networks have been uncovered operating in major cities, with victims forced into prostitution or labor under threat of abuse. And what's really heartbreaking is that only a fraction of modern slaves ever escape. Unlike historical slavery, where people were openly bought and sold, today's slavery is designed to be invisible. Victims were often unable to seek help because of language barriers, isolation, threats, or fear of authorities. Many people don't even realize they are legally considered slaves. Despite international efforts to combat modern slavery, the numbers keep rising. The global demand for cheap labor, exploitative industries, and organized crime ensures that millions remain trapped. It's a crisis hidden behind everyday life, ignored by governments and fueled by the same economic systems we all participate in. Right now, someone somewhere is being bought and sold like property. Slavery didn't disappear, it just adapted, and it's bigger today than ever before. Humanity came terrifyingly close to extinction. 70,000 years ago, the entire population of early Homo sapiens was reduced to as few as 1,000 breeding individuals, maybe even fewer. That's smaller than the population of a rural village, smaller than most endangered species today. Every person alive right now, every culture, every civilization that has ever existed can trace its lineage back to this tiny, fragile group of survivors. This catastrophic event, known as the Toba bottleneck theory, suggests that a supervolcanic eruption at Lake Toba in present-day Indonesia triggered a planetary disaster. The eruption was one of the largest in Earth's history, ejecting 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash into the atmosphere, enough to cover the entire United States in several feet of debris. The sky darkened, temperatures plummeted by as much as 15 degrees Celsius or 27 Fahrenheit worldwide, plunging the planet into a volcanic winter that lasted for possibly 1,000 years. Crops failed, food sources collapsed, and early human populations were decimated. But it wasn't just the eruption itself that nearly ended us. The aftermath was worse. Acid rain poisoned rivers and lakes, dust choked the skies, and plants struggled to photosynthesize in the ash-clouded sun. Animals that early humans depended on for survival, mammoths, antelopes, giant birds, died off in massive numbers. As food became scarce, clans and tribes would have turned against each other, fighting for whatever resources remained. The genetic evidence for this near extinction is buried in our own DNA. Studies show that modern human genetic diversity is shockingly low for a species that dominates the planet. Compared to many other animals, we are almost clones of each other, genetically speaking. This means our ancestors went through a bottleneck, a period where our gene pool was squeezed into a dangerously small number of individuals before expanding again. Some estimates suggest that there may have been as few as 500 reproducing humans left on Earth at one point. Yet against all odds, we survived. Small bands of humans, possibly isolated along coastlines or in small fertile pockets, managed to hold on. Some scientists believe that our ancestors adapted by learning to fish, cooperate, and innovate in ways no other species could. It's possible that this very crisis sharpened our intelligence, forcing us to develop new tools, new hunting techniques, and stronger social structures. It may have been the moment that truly made us human. The fact that we exist at all is a miracle of survival. If those few thousand people had failed, if they had starved, if disease had wiped them out, if the cold had been just a few degrees worse, humanity might have ended before it ever began. There would be no pyramids, space travel, cities, or civilizations. The world would have remained wild and empty. Our species lost to history before it even had a chance to leave its mark. Every person alive today, from every corner of the planet, carries the legacy of that near-extinction event. We are all descendants of the lucky few who outlived one of the worst disasters in Earth's history. We weren't supposed to make it, but we did. You are not the same person you were a decade ago, at least not on a cellular level. Your body is constantly rebuilding itself, shedding old cells, creating new ones, and replacing its worn-out components with fresh material. In fact, most of your organs are younger than you think. Your skin completely regenerates every month. Your bones refresh every 10 years. Even your liver, a powerhouse of detoxification, can regrow itself in just a few months. But there are parts of you that have never changed, parts that have been with you since the beginning and are untouched, unrenewed, and aging alongside you. And some of those parts are in your brain. The neurons in some areas of your brain, especially the cerebral cortex, responsible for thought, memory, reasoning, and personality, do not regenerate. They were formed when you were still in the womb, and they will stay with you until the day that you die. The cells in these areas are among the oldest in your body, older than your hair, older than your blood, older than the very skin that covers your bones. While other cells die and are replaced, these brain cells remain, carrying the weight of your entire life's experiences. This is both a gift and a curse. Because these neurons never regenerate, they allow you to retain memories, knowledge, and skills across decades. Your ability to remember your childhood, first love, darkest fears, and proudest achievements depends on the survival of these ancient neurons. But once they're damaged, there's no natural way for your body to replace them. This is why brain injuries, strokes, and neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are so devastating. When these cells are lost, they are lost forever. Your heart, too, contains a set of cardiomyocytes, specialized heart muscle cells that regenerate so slowly that many of them are nearly as old as you. By the time you reach 50, more than half of your heart cells will have been with you since birth, tirelessly beating billions of times to keep you alive. Scientists once believed that all brain cells were permanent, but recent discoveries have shown that some regions, like the hippocampus, crucial for learning and memory, can produce new neurons. However, the majority of your brain remains a living fossil of your earliest existence, carrying with it the echoes of your entire life. So while your body is in a constant state of renewal, some parts of you have never changed. The neurons that fired when you took your first steps, the ones that absorbed the first words you ever spoke, they're still inside you, they're still working, they're still remembering. And when you look in the mirror, know that at least some part of you has been watching from the very beginning. In the late 15th and early 16th centuries, a terrifying disease swept through England and parts of Europe, striking suddenly, killing quickly, and then vanishing as mysteriously as it had appeared. It was called sweating sickness, and to this day, scientists still don't know exactly what caused it. The disease emerged in 1485, shortly after the Battle of Bosworth Field, which ended the War of the Roses. The first outbreak hit England hard, especially London, and continued to return in devastating waves for nearly 70 years. Unlike the slow-burning plagues of the past, sweating sickness moved fast. It could kill within 24 hours, sometimes even mere hours after the first symptoms appeared. Those who caught it had little chance of survival, and worst of all, no one understood how it spread or how to stop it. The symptoms were as bizarre as they were terrifying. Victims would suddenly experience an overwhelming sense of dread, followed by violent chills and shivering. Within minutes, an unbearable fever would set in, accompanied by blinding headaches, rapid heartbeat, and severe pain in the neck and limbs. Then came the most terrifying stage: profuse, uncontrollable sweating, drenching victims in their own fluids as they gasped for breath. Many would die from sudden heart failure or collapse into a coma before the fever had even peaked. Those who survived the first 24 hours often made a full recovery, but for most, survival was never an option. Sweating sickness was highly selective in who it killed. Unlike the Black Death, which ravaged rich and poor alike, this disease seemed to target the wealthy and noble classes disproportionately. It tore through royal courts, noble households, and affluent city dwellers, while many lower-class laborers were mysteriously spared. Even King Henry VIII was terrified of it, going so far as to isolate himself in different palaces whenever an outbreak surfaced. His close friends and personal courtier, Sir Francis Poynts, was among its victims. And then, just as mysteriously as it had come, it disappeared. The last known outbreak occurred in 1551, after which sweating sickness seemingly ceased to exist. No trace of it has ever been found again. Modern scientists have speculated that it could have been caused by a hantavirus, an unknown strain of influenza, or even an early form of an Ebola-like virus, but no definitive cause has ever been identified. A disease that could kill in a single day, sweep through the highest ranks of society, and then vanish without a trace remains one of the greatest medical mysteries in history. And the most unsettling thought, if it disappeared once, could it ever return? Sleep is supposed to be a biological guarantee, a necessity as fundamental as breathing. But for those afflicted with fatal familial insomnia, or FFI, sleep doesn't just become difficult, it becomes impossible. And once it starts, there is no cure, treatment, or escape. Fatal familial insomnia is one of the rarest and most terrifying diseases known to science. It's a genetic disorder passed down through families, lurking in the DNA like a ticking time bomb. People who carry the mutation can live normal, healthy lives for decades, completely unaware that something is waiting inside of them. Until one day, they start losing the ability to sleep. At first, it's mild: trouble falling asleep, restless nights, strange dreams. But then it worsens. The body refuses to shut down. The mind remains fully awake, unable to drift into unconsciousness no matter how exhausted the person feels. As sleep deprivation takes its toll, the symptoms become horrifying. Severe hallucinations set in, muscle spasms and tremors take over, heart rate and blood pressure skyrocket. The victim begins to lose control of their body, stumbling through the world in a delirious, dreamlike state, except they never actually dream. As weeks go by, the insomnia becomes absolute. The brain, unable to repair itself through rest, begins to disintegrate. The victim experiences dementia, paranoia, and nightmarish waking visions. Deprived of sleep's regenerative power, the body starts breaking down from the inside out. Eventually, the person enters a state of total cognitive collapse, slipping into a coma-like state, not of rest, but of irreversible brain failure. Death usually occurs within 6 to 18 months of the first symptoms. The person quite literally dies from exhaustion. But the worst part is that they remain aware of what is happening to them the entire time. FFI is caused by mutation in the PRNP gene, which creates a malformed protein called a prion, similar to the deadly prions that cause mad cow disease and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. These prions infect the thalamus, the part of the brain responsible for regulating sleep, slowly destroying it. Unlike typical diseases, which are caused by bacteria or viruses, the immune system cannot fight prion diseases. They are an unstoppable biological glitch, proteins gone rogue, eating the brain from the inside. Only around 40 families worldwide carry this nightmare mutation, and if a parent has it, their child has a 50% chance of inheriting it. There is no cure, no treatment, no way to delay the inevitable. Even the most potent sleep medications don't work. The body simply forgets how to shut itself down. Some victims have tried experimental treatments, including artificial comas, cryotherapy, or deep brain stimulation, but nothing has been able to stop the relentless march of the disease. The only certainty is that it always ends the same way once it begins. Fatal familial insomnia is one of the most horrifying realities of human biology, a genetic curse that turns one of the most basic human functions into an inescapable death sentence. The idea that you could one day close your eyes, try to sleep, and never be able to again is almost too terrifying to comprehend, and yet for a few unfortunate families, it's reality. In 2001, geneticist Brian Sykes introduced a theory that rewrote our understanding of human ancestry. Known as the 7 Daughters of Eve, it suggests that nearly all modern Europeans can trace their maternal lineage back to just 7 women who lived tens of thousands of years ago. These prehistoric women, though separated by vast distances and centuries, left an unbroken genetic legacy that still exists today, passed down through mitochondrial DNA, the tiny genetic material inherited exclusively from mothers. Mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, is unique. Unlike nuclear DNA, which recombines from both parents with each generation, mtDNA remains largely unchanged as it's passed from mother to child. This makes it an invaluable tool for tracing direct maternal ancestry back for thousands of years. By analyzing mitochondrial DNA from populations across Europe, Sykes identified 7 distinct genetic lineages, each originating from a single ancestral woman. These 7 women, whom he named Ursula, Xenia, Helena, Velda, Tara, Katrine, and Jasmine, lived between 10,000 and 45,000 years ago, scattered across Ice Age Europe. Ursula, the oldest, lived around 45,000 years ago in what is now Greece. She was part of one of the earliest waves of modern humans to migrate into Europe, following large herds of game across vast frozen landscapes. Helena, another maternal ancestor, lived 20,000 years ago in the region that would become France during the peak of the last ice age. Her descendants later became the dominant genetic group in Western Europe. Tara, who lived 70,000 years ago, likely roamed the lush forests of Italy as glaciers receded, while Katrine's lineage originated in what is now Venice. While these 7 women were not the only mothers of their time, their direct maternal lines survived, while others eventually faded away. The discovery of these 7 ancestral mothers does not mean that they were unique or special, only that their mitochondrial DNA was successfully passed down, while other lines were lost over time. The implications of this theory are profound. It means that despite national and ethnic divisions, most Europeans share common maternal ancestors, uniting them in a way that history often fails to acknowledge. Further research has expanded this concept beyond Europe, revealing that all modern humans can ultimately trace their maternal lineage back to a single woman who lived in Africa around 200,000 years ago, mitochondrial Eve. The 7 Daughters of Eve theory is a reminder that no matter how diverse we seem, our roots are far more intertwined than we might think. There are medical conditions that defy logic, that make you question whether the human body is capable of horrors beyond our understanding. Teratomas are one of them. Unlike ordinary tumors, which grow as formless masses of cells, teratomas are tumors that can develop human features: hair, teeth, bones, even fully formed eyes. The word teratoma comes from the Greek word teras, meaning monster, and oma, meaning tumor. It is an unsettlingly accurate name. These bizarre growths occur when cells meant to develop into an embryo go rogue, forming a body-like structure inside a person instead of creating life. Essentially, a teratoma is a biological glitch, a tumor made from the raw ingredients of human development. Most teratomas are found in the ovaries or testes, where reproductive cells have the potential to create a full organism. But instead of forming new life, these cells create a grotesque mix of tissues: patches of skin, clumps of hair, cartilage, and sometimes even recognizable body parts like fingers, eyeballs, or partially developed limbs. Some have even been found to contain brain matter, spinal tissue, and functional sweat glands. One of the most infamous cases was a woman who had been experiencing strange neurological symptoms, seizures, hallucinations, and changes in personality. Doctors eventually discovered a teratoma inside her ovary that contained brain tissue. Even stranger, the woman's immune system was attacking the brain matter in the tumor, and in doing so, it began attacking her own brain, causing her psychiatric symptoms. While many teratomas are harmless and go undetected for years, others can grow to horrifying sizes, displacing organs and causing severe pain. One case involved a fully developed teratoma the size of a basketball, complete with hair and teeth being removed from a patient's abdomen. Another documented case described a tumor that contained a malformed miniature face, complete with a rudimentary jaw and an undeveloped eye socket. Though terrifying teratomas are not alive, they do not think, they do not feel, and they do not grow with intent. But that doesn't make them any less unsettling, does it? So let's end on a positive note, shall we? No more teratomas. Despite the horrors, cruelty, and suffering that define much of human history, there has never been a better time to be alive than right now. It's easy to get caught up in the negativity of the modern world, but compared to any other point in time, we are safer, healthier, and more free than any generation before us. If you were ever going to be born at any time in history, this is the time you'd want to be here. Life was short, brutal, and dangerous for most of human history. The average lifespan was just 30 years for thousands of years. Childbirth was a death sentence for many women. Minor infections could kill within days, and something as simple as a bad tooth could be fatal. Thanks to modern medicine, we live longer, healthier lives than ever. Diseases like smallpox, the bubonic plague, and polio, once mass killers, have been nearly wiped out. Even the wealthiest kings and emperors of the past didn't have access to the kind of medical care that the average person receives today. Violence and war have also declined dramatically. In medieval Europe, large-scale wars, genocides, and constant bloodshed were an accepted part of life. Even as recently as the 20th century, 2 world wars killed over 100 million people. But today, despite conflicts still existing, your chances of dying a violent death are lower than at almost any time in history. Poverty, once an inescapable reality for most of the world, has been rapidly decreasing. 2 centuries ago, 90% of people lived in extreme poverty. Now their number is below 10%. More people have access to clean water, electricity, food, education, and medical care than ever before. Technology has made everyday life easier and safer. Things we take for granted today, like electricity, refrigeration, running water, and modern sanitation, were luxuries, or simply didn't exist for most of human history. We are also the most connected and educated generation in history. For thousands of years, knowledge was controlled by a select few. Books were rare, and the vast majority of people were illiterate. Today, the entire sum of human knowledge is available at your fingertips. You can speak to someone on the other side of the world instantly. You can learn almost anything for free and access more information than even the greatest scholars of history. Personal freedom has also expanded dramatically. For most of history, people were born into rigid roles: peasants, slaves, or second-class citizens, locked into a life they could never escape. Today, more people than ever can choose their careers. They can travel freely, they can express their beliefs, and decide how they want to live. And the future? It's more exciting than ever. We're on the verge of medical breakthroughs, space exploration, and technological advancements that could transform life as we know it. We're actively working toward curing diseases, extending human lifespan, harnessing clean energy, and even exploring the possibility of colonizing other planets. For all its flaws, this era is the best time in human history to be alive. We live longer, we suffer less, and have more opportunities than any previous generation. While challenges still exist, And don't we know it, we now have the knowledge, the tools, and the technology to solve problems that have plagued humanity for thousands of years. So the next time the world feels overwhelming, remember, you're one of the luckiest humans to ever exist. Humanity's a puzzle. A strange, messy, unpredictable experiment in survival, evolution, and mystery. We've conquered diseases, yet our own biology can betray us in ways we barely understand. We've mapped our DNA, but hidden inside it are the ghosts of species long extinct. We built civilizations that reached for the stars, but our past is filled with cruelty, deception, and horror. For every terrifying disease, there's an inexplicable wonder. For every dark moment in history, there's a discovery that has changed the world. We are both the experiment and the scientist, the monster and the miracle. Thank you for watching.